Ladies and gentlemen, what if tonight isn't just another night? What if, while you're going about your usual routine, something in eternity is shifting quietly, deliberately waiting for you to notice? What if the voice you've been straining to hear, the change you've been hoping for, the sign you stopped asking for, actually arrives not with thunder, but with a whisper? God said, "Watch this tonight." And maybe, just maybe, that's the moment your life begins to change forever. What we often call interruptions are sometimes the most meaningful parts of our lives. We plan our days with a sense of order, seeking control in routines and protecting ourselves from chaos. Yet occasionally something comes along, an unexpected moment, a word, a person, a sudden shift in circumstance, and it halts the rhythm of our comfortable march. These interruptions often feel inconvenient, awkward, or even threatening at first. But what if they are not random at all? What if the very moment we're resisting is the one God has been preparing for a long time? God does not operate on our schedules. He is not subject to the structure of our planners or the rhythm of our habits. His interventions are not polite calendar invites. They arrive like a knock at the door in the middle of the night, unexpected, unnerving, and impossible to ignore. But these interruptions are not acts of disorder. They are divine insertions of meaning. They are the movements of a larger will intersecting our smaller ones. And when He speaks, when He says, "Watch this tonight," it's never casual. It is deliberate, calculated, and deeply personal. We are often unaware of the deeper context in which our lives unfold. We perceive only the surface, while underneath there is a tapestry being woven of which we see only a single thread. That thread may fray, it may not, it may seem out of place, but the weaver sees the whole pattern. So when the thread pulls taut and we feel the tension of disruption, it is easy to assume something has gone wrong. What we do not see is that something greater may be beginning. The truth is, we are far too easily content with a version of life that is small and safe. We grow accustomed to merely surviving, numbing ourselves with entertainment, distractions, or the lull of repetition. It is only when God interrupts this rhythm that we are forced to awaken. He does not interrupt to punish or shame us, but to rouse us, to remind us that we are alive, and that our lives still carry meaning beyond comfort. When God says, "Watch this tonight," it may not mean something spectacular will unfold before our eyes. It may not be a miracle in the traditional sense, like water into wine or a blind man seeing. It may be quieter, stranger. It might be a deep stirring of conviction, a piercing word, a sudden clarity that feels like waking from a dream. The miracle might happen within, where the real transformations take place. And yet, it is no less divine because it does not come with thunder. Our role in these moments is not to understand everything, but to pay attention. Divine interruptions are often misunderstood because we are not trained to listen. We are trained to fix, to solve, to resume. But the voice of God is not a background noise we can multitask through. It requires stillness, attention, reverence. When the interruption comes, it is a summons to pause, to look again, to listen deeper. We do not always know what change looks like in its earliest form. A seed does not resemble the tree it will become. A whisper does not resemble the storm it precedes. In the same way, the moment you are being invited into may seem insignificant, or even unwelcome, yet it may contain the turning point of your life. The change God initiates through interruption is not always external. Often, the outer world looks unchanged, but something inside has shifted forever. You are no longer who you were before the interruption. The God who created time does not waste moments. When He steps into your timeline, He does so with perfect intent. There is no coincidence in His vocabulary, only purpose. So when something interrupts your expectations, dare to consider that it might be orchestrated by a hand wiser than your own. Instead of retreating back into control, you are invited to lean into trust. This moment, strange as it may feel, could be the beginning of your real story. You may not recognize the interruption as holy until much later, when you look back and see that everything changed from that point onward. But tonight, yes, this very night might be such a point. You did not plan it. You did not ask for it. But it is here. The thread has been pulled. The weaver is at work. And everything in your life may be about to take a new shape, not in spite of the interruption, but because of it. We live under the illusion that reality is limited to what we can see, hear, and touch. The physical world, with its objects and measurements, feels solid and authoritative. It defines the boundaries of our daily experience, what we call real. Yet there is something deeper, a quiet truth that flickers just at the edge of perception. The veil between the seen and unseen is far thinner than we imagine. What we take to be the whole of existence may be only the surface. Beneath it, surrounding it, and often breaking into it, is a far more immense reality, spiritual, eternal, alive. From time to time, this deeper reality presses against the visible world. It leaks through in moments we can't quite explain, a sudden sense of peace in the midst of chaos, a conviction that goes deeper than logic, a dream that lingers with unsettling clarity. These moments suggest that the world we see is not the whole world. There is a realm beyond it, not far away but near, not later but now. It is as close as breath, as present as thought. And yet we so often miss it because we are not trained to look for it. We've been conditioned to treat the invisible as imaginary. Our culture praises what is verifiable, measurable, repeatable. And to some degree, rightly so, this has given us science, medicine, progress. But it has also left us spiritually nearsighted. It has taught us to believe that if something can't be proved, it must not exist. This mindset builds a wall between the visible and the invisible, between body and soul, between heaven and earth. But the wall is not real, it is something we have built to make ourselves feel safe, to keep the mystery at bay. God, however, is not bound by our categories. He does not knock on the door of human logic asking to be let in. He moves freely between the worlds, speaking through burning bushes, through dreams, through people, through silence. And often, he speaks in such a way that only those who are paying attention will notice. The veil is not torn by force, it is parted by wonder. A person must be willing to admit that there is more than meets the eye in order to see what lies beyond it. This is why when God says something like, "Watch this tonight," it is not simply about what appears on the surface. It is a call to see differently, to allow your senses to extend beyond the material. The world is enchanted, not in the way of fairy tales, but in the way that it is charged with meaning, eternal meaning. The unseen world is not a fantasy. It is the foundation upon which the seen world rests. What you perceive as solid is held together by something you cannot perceive, and what you consider to be real is often just the shadow of what is truly real. Consider the way a sunrise changes a landscape. The trees, the hills, the paths, they were all there in the dark. You just couldn't see them. In the same way, God's truth surrounds us, even when we live in darkness. But once the light comes, once the veil is lifted, we realize the world was always more than we thought. The unseen becomes seen not because it arrived, but because we awoke. Spiritual reality does not obey the rules of ordinary time. It does not depend on your plans, your state of mind, or even your readiness. It simply is. But your ability to perceive it, your awareness that can change. Sometimes all it takes is a moment. One sentence, one realization, one event, and suddenly the whole framework shifts. You begin to suspect that maybe you are not alone in the universe. Maybe there has been a story unfolding all along, and maybe, just maybe, you are part of it. It is this unseen story that gives meaning to your visible life. Without it, your achievements, your failures, your pain and pleasure, they all fade like mist. But within the deeper story, every moment matters. Every tear is counted. Every step is directed. What looks like coincidence becomes providence. What feels like silence becomes the space in which God is speaking. When you are invited to watch, you are not being asked to observe passively. You are being invited into awareness, into vision. The moment may look ordinary, but something sacred is happening underneath. And if you are willing to look with the eyes of the soul, you may see it, the veil parting, the eternal breaking in, the voice that says, I am here, I always have been. The most significant changes in a person's life rarely begin with noise. They do not come with fire from the sky or grand declarations. Instead, they begin in stillness. There is a quiet that often precedes transformation, a silence that the world may overlook, but heaven does not. This is not the silence of absence, but the silence of presence waiting to be noticed. In that space, something deep begins to stir, often before we even realize it. A moment unfolds, a sentence heard, a memory recalled, a realization dawning not from outside but from within, and the entire direction of a life begins to change. We are a people trained to equate importance with spectacle. We expect that anything life-changing must look large and sound loud. Our eyes have been trained on drama, our ears tuned to volume. But God often speaks in ways that run contrary to our expectations. He does not force himself into our awareness. He does not crash through the front doors of our minds. Instead, he waits. He speaks softly. He enters through the side door, through the still places, the quiet thoughts, the lingering feelings we cannot quite explain. He speaks in the silence between words, the pause between heartbeats, the stillness between distractions. This is why we miss so much. We fill our lives with constant sound and motion, afraid of quiet. Silence feels threatening in a world addicted to stimulation. Yet it is in this stillness that God most often chooses to speak. Not because he cannot use louder means, but because he desires intimacy, not entertainment. He wants us to hear him, not merely as background noise, but as a voice that finds us when all other voices have faded. His whisper is not weakness, it is invitation. It is his way of ensuring that we truly want to listen. Transformation, then, begins not in the outer world, but in the inner one. Before anything changes in your circumstances, something changes in your perception. You start to see differently. You start to feel the shift before you can name it. It may come as a question that won't let go of you. It may come as a sudden clarity in the middle of an ordinary moment. It might be a piece of music that opens something in you, a phrase spoken by a stranger that feels oddly personal, or even the ache of a long-held pain finally surfacing with weight and meaning. These are not random. These are the quiet knockings of God on the door of your soul. You will not always understand the significance of such moments as they happen. They may feel small, almost forgettable, but time has a way of revealing their weight. What looked like a simple evening, a passing conversation, or a subtle nudge may later be recognized as the moment your story shifted course. The seed of transformation was planted not with a shout, but with a whisper, and because it was quiet, it was able to reach deeper places, places that louder messages could never touch. This is how God works in love. He does not overwhelm, he invites. He does not force growth, he plants and waits. He knows that a soul cannot be rushed into change. The soil of the heart must be prepared, the seasons allowed to pass. But when the right moment comes, it only takes a single word, a breath, a glimpse, and everything begins to grow. And from that small beginning, an entirely new life can emerge. The world may not notice. You may not even fully notice. But if you are listening, if you are open, you will sense it that something has started. A new awareness has taken root. A corner has turned, and what once felt stuck begins to loosen. Hope, long buried, begins to stir. The path forward, once invisible, begins to form under your feet. It is not always with clarity. Often it begins with courage, the quiet kind, the kind that simply says, maybe there is more. And that is enough. In fact, that is everything. Because all great transformations begin there, in the heart that listens, in the soul that watches, in the life that dares to pay attention to the quiet moment that everyone else missed. You are not a random occurrence in the universe, though it may sometimes feel that way when the days blend into each other, when losses pile up, when your questions go unanswered. Your existence is not accidental. There is a story being told, and you are a character within it. This story did not begin with your birth, nor will it end with your final breath. It stretches beyond time, woven into a vast and intricate narrative authored by a mind far greater than your own. And within this immense design, your life, with all its pain and joy, confusion and clarity, is a thread of purpose. We are trained to see life as a sequence of personal milestones: birth, childhood, education, work, relationships, perhaps a few adventures along the way. These are the markers we use to measure the passage of time. Yet beneath these events there is a deeper rhythm, a spiritual one that reveals itself not in schedules or achievements, but in moments of significance. Moments when you sense something has changed, something in the atmosphere of your soul shifts, a new chapter begins, even if you cannot yet name it. Such moments often begin with a divine prompting. You are going about your life, busy or bored, weary or distracted, and then suddenly something calls your attention, an invitation, a phrase, a circumstance that feels oddly personal. It could be as simple as hearing, "Watch this tonight." It may not sound like a command, but rather like a nudge, a sentence that finds you and lingers, as if it were spoken not to the room but directly to your heart. You might not know why it resonates, but it does. And somewhere deep inside you realize this is a turning point. In stories, we call these moments inciting incidents. They are the parts of the plot where everything begins to shift. The main character encounters a truth, receives a calling, stumbles upon a mystery. From that moment on, the narrative changes. And in your own life, these moments are just as real. They may not come with dramatic music or flashing lights, but they carry the weight of destiny. They are the places where the larger story breaks into the smaller one, where heaven touches earth, where God interrupts the ordinary with the eternal. It's easy to overlook your own story when you compare it to others. We often believe the myth that our lives must be loud and impressive to be meaningful. But God is not measuring your life by your visibility. He is shaping you in ways unseen. You may be in a chapter that feels slow, repetitive, even meaningless. Yet within the narrative, those are often the places of deepest preparation. The quiet pages are where the heart is readied for the next unfolding. And so, when a moment arrives that calls you to attention, it is not to be dismissed. That subtle pull you feel toward reflection, toward surrender, toward something you can't yet explain is not random. It may be the moment your personal story is aligning with something far older and wiser than you've ever imagined. It may be the point where your thread is being woven more deeply into the grand tapestry, a design that stretches across generations, kingdoms, and eternities. You may not yet know what this part of the story will hold. You do not know what the next scene will demand or what sacrifices it will require. But that is the nature of story. The character never sees the whole plot at once. He walks forward moment by moment with faith in the author. The twists and turns, the triumphs and tragedies, they are not obstacles to the story. They are the story. Even now your life is not standing still. Something is being written. Something is being shaped. And the moment you begin to notice that even faintly you are stepping into awareness, you are no longer simply reacting to life. You are realizing that you are part of something authored with care, with wisdom, and with love. That realization alone changes how you move forward. The path ahead may still be uncertain, but now you walk it with the knowledge that you are not aimless. You are not forgotten. You are being written into something beautiful. There is a certain kind of night that feels heavier than others, not because of weather or circumstance, but because something inside you begins to feel the weight of possibility. It might begin with restlessness, an unease that lingers in your chest, or a longing that has no name. You might be sitting in your usual place, doing something ordinary, and yet something is different. There's a tension in the air, a quiet invitation that seems to hover just above the moment. You're not sure what it is or where it's going, but you know this much: something is happening. This is how change often begins, not with clarity, but with a disturbance. Not with instructions, but with awareness. There is no trumpet sound, no scroll from the sky. Instead, a single sentence might echo in your mind, "Watch this tonight." It could seem like nothing. It could feel like a fleeting phrase. And yet, it stays. It holds your attention longer than it should. It stirs something in you that hasn't moved in a long time. These are the kinds of moments that don't make sense to others because they are not meant for others. They are personal, inward, and precise. You can't explain why it matters to you, only that it does. It touches something old inside you, something sacred, something that was waiting. You realize that the change you've hoped for, perhaps even stopped believing in, might not come in the ways you expected. It may not arrive with thunder or bright signs. Instead, it may come in quiet obedience to a single, seemingly ordinary moment. The sacred often hides itself in the small. God's voice does not compete for attention. It speaks to those who are listening. And so when a moment arrives that feels strangely full of meaning, full of possibility, full of unseen weight, it's not your imagination. It's a window. It's an opening in time where something deeper is happening beneath the surface of things. The veil is thinner. The distance between heaven and earth, between your present and your purpose, feels less impossible. And if you are paying attention, you sense it. The time is now. You may have been waiting for permission, waiting for clarity, waiting for the right moment to start becoming who you were meant to be. But when God speaks, when He says, "Watch this tonight," it's not simply an alert. It's an invitation to participation. He is not just showing you something, He is including you in it. He is calling you out of passivity and into presence. You are no longer a bystander in your own life. You are being asked to respond, to trust, to take the next small step, even if you don't know where it leads. The discomfort you feel may not be confusion, but awakening. Something inside you is beginning to realize that you cannot stay where you are. Not because where you are is necessarily wrong, but because it is no longer where you are meant to remain. Change often begins with the simple recognition that staying the same is more painful than stepping into the unknown. And the unknown, frightening as it may be, is also holy ground when God is in it. The shift does not always start in the visible world. You may look around and see nothing different, but something has already begun. You are watching differently now. You are listening. And that listening, that openness, that holy awareness, that is the ground from which real transformation grows. What seemed like an ordinary night may become the night you remember forever. Not because something outside you changed instantly, but because something inside you did. The story of change is rarely written in headlines. It is written in the quiet decisions, in the private moments, in the whispered yes to something you don't yet fully understand. These are the moments that alter the direction of a life. These are the thresholds between what was and what could be. And when you cross that threshold, when you stop brushing off the feeling and start paying attention, you become part of a story larger than your own. The moment you're living through may not feel like a miracle, but that does not mean it isn't one. The miracle may not be in the circumstances, but in the shift happening within you, the shift from numbness to awareness, from waiting to walking, from despair to hope. Something has begun quietly and surely, and it is already reshaping you from the inside out. There is a deep ache that follows most people throughout their lives, the ache of being unseen, unheard, forgotten. It doesn't always show on the surface. Often it is tucked beneath the responsibilities, hidden behind achievements, or masked by humor and distraction. But it is there, quietly whispering that perhaps your life is too small to matter. Your voice too soft to be heard, your pain too personal to be noticed by the infinite. In a world obsessed with speed, spectacle, and self-promotion, it is easy to believe that only the loud are loved, only the large lives are known, only the obvious wounds are worth healing. But this is not the way of God. There is something profoundly personal about how God sees. His vision is not diluted by the billions who breathe under the same sky. His knowing is not general, not vague, not based on patterns or trends. His gaze rests fully on each soul as though it were the only one in existence. The human heart struggles to understand this because we live in systems that reward visibility and popularity. But God does not lose sight of you in the crowd. He does not forget you in the ordinary. He does not overlook you because you have failed or fallen behind. In fact, He is most attentive to what others miss. You may be walking through a season where your efforts feel unnoticed. You show up, you try, you carry burdens no one else sees, and still the silence stretches long. But what you interpret as absence is often divine attention in disguise. God is not absent because He is quiet. He is quiet because He is close. His silence is not indifference, it is intimacy. There is a sacredness to the moments when no one else sees, because it is in those very places that God sees most clearly. Every tear you've cried in private, every prayer that didn't make it past your lips, every unspoken longing, you have never truly carried any of it alone. Though others may not have known the depth of your battle, heaven has. Though your name may never be etched on monuments or sung in stories, it has been written into a book that does not fade. And while the world may pass you by without a second glance, the one who made you has never looked away. We often ask for signs, for wonders, for proof that God is with us. We want flashes of lightning, pillars of fire, dramatic deliverance. But His most powerful work is often subtle. A moment of peace that arrives without explanation. A perfectly timed word from a stranger. The sudden knowledge that you are not as alone as you thought. These are not coincidences. These are the fingerprints of a God who is always paying attention. He speaks to the exact need of your heart in ways only you will recognize because He knows you that intimately. When God says something like, "Watch this tonight," it is not a generic announcement. It is a whisper tailor-made for your soul. It means He has something prepared, not for the crowd, not for the cameras, but for you. He is not calling everyone in the same way. He is calling you by name into something new, something sacred, something that begins in the quiet soil of your specific story. And that is the greatest honor, not that you are part of a general movement, but that the God of the universe paused for you. He does not need noise to make His point. He does not require permission to enter your life. He simply waits for the moment you're ready to receive it. And when that moment comes, it feels less like a storm and more like a sunrise, subtle, steady, and absolutely impossible to ignore once it begins. Suddenly you realize the silence was not emptiness but preparation. The hidenness was not punishment but protection. You were not forgotten, you were being formed. This is the God who sees, not in a vague, detached way, but in the way a composer knows every note of their symphony, in the way a painter watches every stroke take shape. You are not lost in the noise of the world. You are known, completely and personally, by the one voice that matters most. And when He calls, He does not call crowds. He calls you, not to perform, not to impress, but simply to come, to watch, to receive what He has been preparing all along. So now, standing at the edge of this moment, you begin to see it clearly. This was never just about a sentence or a whisper in the night. It was about something greater reaching into your life, something sacred that has been waiting for you to notice. What seemed small was never small at all. What felt quiet was thunder in disguise. God has been moving, not in the margins, but in the center of your story, your heart, your pain, your purpose. This night is not ordinary. This is not just another turn of the clock. This is a beginning, a divine pause where heaven leans in and says, "Watch this tonight, your life is about to change forever." Not because everything will suddenly be easy, but because now you know you are not alone, not forgotten, not lost in the dark. You are seen. You are called. You are loved by the one who writes new stories out of broken chapters. Tonight is not the end. It is the spark. Let it burn. Let it begin.